Well, well, good day and good evening and good morning, whatever time it is. This is the Black Jacket speaking, and I wanted to continue the point, the theme of polyandry as practiced by Joseph Smith, and specifically as practiced by one of his uber faithful, I'll use a German prefix, it's actually pronounced uber faithful, super duper faithful followers, Parley Parker Pratt, otherwise known disaffectionately as PPP, not to be confused with the MMM, which is the Mountain Meadows Massacre. But I believe that the events of PPP, Parley Parker Pratt, literally led to the events collectively known as MMM. But that's another story. The thing that I want to emphasize is that Pratt was so smitten by the example of Joseph Smith Jr. that he also took another man's wife and expected that the other man would just acquiesce to it. The reason Smith wasn't killed by any of these other men is because they ingratiated themselves and groveled at his feet and said, "Whatever the prophet does is right." And in that way, they could suspend their own thinking altogether. But in Parley Parker Pratt's case, the man in question was not a Mormon, did not believe in any of this nonsense, and had his wife stolen right out from under him by none other than Parley Parker Pratt, who stole wife number 7, who was still married to Hector McLean when she ran off with Pratt. Long story short, we see a rendezvous in Arkansas. Somehow the McLean children were staying with relatives in Arkansas, and McLean went, I guess, on horseback and met up with PPP, Parley Parker Pratt, and gave good chase. And I don't, now the details get a little fuzzy because there are several different accounts. One says he stabbed Pratt in the upper chest with a large knife when his revolvers failed to fire, when they misfired. Or, and another account has that he actually shot Pratt in the upper chest, and Pratt took the whole night to die, bleeding to death internally. But the point is, and I always say this euphemistically or as a euphemism, that I can imagine this incensed husband had his wife stolen out from under him. I can imagine him riding hard after Pratt on his horse, saying, "Stop, you thief! You stole my wife, you horse thief! Now you're going to die." And they did hang horse thieves back in the 1850s. So the question is, wasn't a wife worth more than a horse? So McLean was never prosecuted uh, for anything wrong. If they hanged horse thieves, then he was justified in dispatching Pratt for stealing something more valuable than a horse for stealing the man's wife. So Pratt apparently thought that any man would acquiesce to his so-called authority in the church and let Pratt steal the wife. And in McLean's case, absolutely not. He wasn't a Mormon, didn't believe in that nonsense, and saw the man as being a thief. Worse than a horse thief. And so ends the story. But Pratt actually was following the example of Joseph Smith. He took his inspiration in doing so from Smith himself. And this is something that members deny, but it is factual. All they have to do is go to LDS.org, look up the family group records, and there's record after record of individually of Smith marrying all of these women in their own turn and in their own time, one after the other, including 6 or 8 who were still married to their first husband. So he did practice polyandry, and so did Parley Parker Pratt. I should say that I should qualify that and say the wives, the women were practicing polyandry, each one having 2 husbands. This was an acceptable thing in the early LDS church in the Nauvoo period. And later, in 1857, with Pratt, he was still doing it.